welcome to Soul Focus. I have my guest here, Kris Svendsen.
Swensen, yeah, like a W.
I'm bad. I mispronounce everyone's name. I'm
That's right.
I can barely pronounce my own name, and it's one syllable. How's everyone tonight? Kris is an astrologer. Actually, Kris, you know yourself better than I do. So why don't you tell us what you do?
Okay. All right. Yes, I'm an astrologer. I've probably been doing it now since I was in my early teens, which takes me, I'm in my 60s now, so it takes me back about 50 years.
Wow.
For when I was always a bit of a nerdy hobbyist back then. Had been into dinosaurs like most kids, and I've moved on to the American Civil War for some reason. I know a lot about that. I got into the assassination of John F. Kennedy too for a long time. I still know a fair bit about that too. A little bit Asperger. I'm not Asperger's, but that's a little bit focused like that.
Yep.
But I realised my mother took me to her cousin's daughter, some distant cousin at that stage, to look at my chart to see what sort of career or vocation would suit me.
Yep.
And I realised that having a talk with the astrologer then, that this was something that you could apply to other subject matters. You could look at anything that had a time, a place, and a date. A moment in time had a flavour, and
Wow.
you could read the potential of that moment in time. Most people think of astrology as their birth chart, maybe, what time they were born, their place, a very individual thing. For most of its history, it hasn't been quite as individual as it has been in the last 100 years or so. But and they realised this map that you could draw where the planets were in the sky against what signs of the zodiac, which is called the ecliptic, the path that the planets travel around the sun.
Yep.
It looks like they're going around us, so to all intensive purposes, it looks like we're centre, not centre of the universe egotistically, but centre of the universe, a centre of our world, and the planets appear to be going around us. So from our perspective, we are seeing a perspective on the sky.
Yep.
And a frozen moment in time has flavours. And so if you're born at a particular moment in time, you've got the flavour of that moment of time.
Okay.
And potentials that will flow from that. And that's why you can look at somebody's natal chart, which can be like a book, and see what sort of career, maybe, how they're going to do in the old relationship stakes. Are they going to children? Are they really, a bit more meaningfully, what sort of life lessons are they going to be confronting?
Life lessons.
And what challenges, positive or negative, that are going to help or hinder them along the way. And so you can read that from a birth chart. But astrology has lots of wings. So I got into it realizing that I could look at my other hobbies. I could look at Lee Oswald's chart, the alleged assassin of Kennedy, and see whether or not it looked like he was guilty at the crucial time and all this sort of thing. And you could play with all these ideas. It's not as simple as I'm making it out, though.
So when you looked at Lee Harvey Oswald, what response did you get?
Okay, he basically, astrologically, there's not a lot showing at the crucial time of the assassination, probably because he's not actually doing anything. But he is, but the time that he's actually formally charged that night at 1:30 in the morning, when the Dallas police drag him out of his cell before a judge and arraign him for the murder of Kennedy, that shows in his chart as deception, betrayal, confusion, nothing particularly violent. In other words, he is just showing what was in his natal chart, which was the potential for him to be a lot of what we call Neptune. Neptune is the planet that has most, when it's positive, to do with spiritual growth, and when it's negative, it tends to be drugs, alcohol, illusions, deceptions, betrayals, disappointment, letdown. Well, that's when the crucial point in his chart is triggered, when he's actually formally arraigned for the president's murder. The flavour of Neptune simply, if I had to go one way or the other, I'd say that's somebody who's been framed.
Yes.
He's the patsy. And I'm not a grand conspiracy theorist. I don't have conspiracy theories about any other subject. I haven't studied them. but having spent so long studying that, I know it's a different subject from what we're talking about tonight, but having studied that for so long, I really think, there's a lot of evidence.
So Jim Garrison was onto something.
He was onto something. He was following he was getting onto the small pawns, though. That was the problem. But he did show that there was Oswald had very strange connections of the opposite political persuasion from what we were told he was. We're told he was a Marxist or something like that, an idealist Marxist, but that was just a legend he was putting on. He was being, told to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's another subject.
That's another subject we could do. Talk about that for ages. Astrology. You're talking about natal charts and the flavors.
Yep. And you basically, I got into it. I did it for many years, learning things. I learned all sorts of things. I devoured books and information. I joined a research group at that stage. They were calling themselves cosmobiologists rather than astrologers. I don't know whether that was an attempt to make it more sophisticated, but it was still astrology. And after doing it so long now, I've done Hindu or Vedic astrology for many years, which is similar but different in ways. I've played with the thing. Currently, I am vice president of the Federation of Australian Astrologers here in South Australia, and I'm on the national committee for the Federation of Australian Astrologers. We have a monthly meeting where we give talks. I've just given the one on Saturday, but we often have guest speakers come in. Yeah, and what else? Fire away anything you want me to narrow it to, but
well, just tell us about you do tarot readings as well.
I mainly got into tarot probably about 30 years ago, simply because the astrology, much as I love it, it can be very technical, and at face value, it could appear that you could be a really good astrologer with no belief in anything. Like you could be a good astrologer and still be an atheistic sort of non-spiritual. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that to do it well, because it has a lot of clear rules and technicalities. But I decided back then, well, I wanted to develop an intuitive side anyway, whether you call it psychic, whatever you want to call it. So I got into the tarot simply because it was less to go on, let's say, at face value. You're just doing the cards, doing it then and there, and saying what popped into your head, based on the cards, of course. That helped develop that, and I came back to my astrology with another layer of focus on top of it. It eventually got me into what we call horary astrology, Horary. Horary astrology is French. This means of the hour, the astrology of the hour, or the minute, of the time. And that's an astrology that was around for most of astrology's history up to about the 1600s. When astrology started to lose a lot of its beliefs, the worldview at that time changed in the 1700s. We had physics, we had Newtonian physics, we had all that sort of stuff come in. Sorry, you want to...
So did that make it? Does that mean you could do the reading by the hour? So like it refined it from a day to doing a reading by the hour. Segment of the hour.
In other words, the exact minute that you draw a chart for, it looks like a birth chart. But you read it differently. You read it in light of the question, in context of the question being asked. So I don't know whether you know what a birth chart looks like. A circle with usually 12 divisions called houses. Houses are segments based on the Earth's rotation in 24 hours. We divide it into 12 segments, and those 12 segments relate to areas of life. There's also 12 signs of the zodiac, which is takes us our path around the sun. 2 big circles that overlap each other, and that draws a map that you're trying to get the time as accurately as possible. And with a horary you can, because if somebody asks me a question and I hear it then and there, and I understand the question, we can look at our watch and say, yes, they've asked this question at 12 in the morning or something like that on this date, and their question is this, and you draw the chart up for that, just like somebody being born at that time. But there are very strict rules with horary. Horary is very black and white. It's contained within a certain period of time ahead. It's not a chart for an indefinite period ahead. It's a chart that projects only so far ahead. So you usually
How far are we
asking about,
talking?
you can set it as long as your intention is there. If you might say, will I get married within the next 2 years? That's fine. If you said, will I ever marry again? That's not such a good question, because it'll give you a yes or no, but it's really only going a certain period of head, like an indefinite period, but it's not going to go forever. And of course, that could be a crushing blow if you want to be married and you've got a no for that answer the question if you said, will I ever marry? So a horary is a little bit restricted to the type of questions you can ask. And it's assumed that your questions are heartfelt, sincere, almost like prayer. You are letting go of it, and you're putting it out to the neutral party, the astrologer, if hopefully they're neutral, they're not your partner or something like this, and they will reading the chart. You can say yes, it looks like a yes, or it looks like a no, but you can say a lot more than yes or no. Looks like a question's popped up on the side there.
If you want to hit it.
Okay, Samantha says, which sites can you trust to receive an accurate birth chart? One called astro.com. So you can, it's basically a European site, and they allow you to put in your data, and it'll calculate a birth chart for you. But as far as interpreting it, that's really another ball game altogether. You can get the chart and you can get the books out and have a look, but if you're not an astrologer, quite often it's the art of synthesizing the information in it and weighing things up. But to actually mathematically draw it up, these days there's a number of websites that will give you a chart based on your birth time and birthplace, and astro.com is probably one of the main ones for that. www.astro.com. Yeah.
So what are some of the other variations of the astrology that you do?
Okay. All right. I mainly do either natal charts or horary charts, and I specialize in horary. But there is other types of astrology that's been around for a long time. There's one called Mundane Astrology, which is looking at the charts of countries or corporate bodies or groups of people. When a ship is launched, you might take the time the ship's launched, and that's the birth of the ship in a sense. It's a funny idea. Sailing the Titanic might have had a definite heavy chart.
Can you tell us about that?
I haven't looked at that astrologically. No.
Oh.
No, I haven't looked at it. There's so many things you can. There's so many things you can look at.
Oh my God, it's so fascinating. Just to look at that stuff. Right. You can sit there for hours just in a room by yourself, going, "Ooh, this thing. Let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at this."
Yeah, that's right. And so, basically, that's mundane. Where you might want to look at the chart of Australia and to see whether how the current Prime Minister's chart is compatible or not compatible with the chart of Australia, this sort of thing. That's mundane. Mundane tends to predict events based like political events or world events. A good example would be at the beginning of 2020, on January 12th in 2020, there was an eclipse. There's usually a couple of eclipses every couple of times a year. There's eclipses. Eclipses don't mean a hell of a lot. What they tend to do is fall at a particular degree in the zodiac, because the eclipse is either the sun and moon in conjunction with each other, or the sun and moon in opposition with each other. That's a lunar or solar eclipse. And when they actually literally overlap each other by latitude as well as longitude, brings them into 3D. That's when we get an eclipse. Eclipses tend to fall at a particular degree, and they repeat these patterns for a period of time. They hover around certain degrees for a period of time, and what they tend to do is sensitize that part of the zodiac. So what actually happened on the 12th of January last year, there was an eclipse at 20 degrees of Capricorn, sign of Capricorn. 20 degrees is 30 degrees in each sign, and nothing literally happened on the 12th of January. But what usually happens with eclipses is the next planets that come along and hit or aspect, which is either they're conjuncting or they actually angle that degree. The next planets that come along sort of get intensified. Well, the next planets that came along was a triple conjunction of Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. at 20 degrees of Capricorn about 10 days later. So even though COVID began probably in late 2019, on the 20th of January or so, around that date last year, Jupiter and Saturn, which conjunct each other about every 20 years, they go around the zodiac at different speeds, but they'll come back to the same point. And Pluto, a lot slower, only comes around once in a blue moon. It takes about 284 degrees or so to go around the zodiac. They all came together at 20 of Capricorn on that sensitized eclipse point. And we say, well, what's that mean? Jupiter is all about expansion, and generally it's a fortunate planet, tends to bring growth, expansion, making things bigger. Jupiter just happens to be in Capricorn when it hit the eclipse degree. In Capricorn, it's in a sign that it hates being in. It's in its sign of fall. Fall is a term, a lot of modern astrologers might not even know what I'm talking about when I say this. Fall is a traditional term that a planet is at its weakest ebb when it's in its fall. So every 2 years, Jupiter will roughly change signs. It came back to Capricorn. It conjuncted Saturn in Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn, so Saturn was at home in Capricorn, and so Saturn was really strong. And Saturn's usually about restriction, limitation, frustration. Restriction is probably a contraction. So Jupiter's about expansion, and Saturn's about contraction. And they come together every 20 years. A bit of a contradiction between the two of them. Nothing necessarily always happens on this 20-year point. American presidents elected on the round figure since the 1840s have all died in term of office if they're elected when Jupiter and Saturn are in conjunction, even though that's not necessarily the normal meaning of them, but this pattern has repeated itself.
Wow.
Another story. But so they came together. But Pluto is a planet that's not even a planet anymore. Unfortunately, astronomers have demoted it. Doesn't mean anything to astrologers. Pluto wasn't discovered till 1930, and they've decided that Pluto has a lot to do with gut-wrenching trauma and deep psychological issues and change and transformation. And Pluto in your chart, when it hits things in your chart, tends to make the earth move, the ground, the rumbling underneath you. Right? And so the combination of the three of them together said there was probably something, who, where, what, something in the world, because it wasn't connecting to anybody's necessarily birth chart unless you had something at 20 degrees of Capricorn in your own chart, and then it could personalize it. But they were hitting like they would in their path. So we have the expanding Jupiter, the contracting Saturn, and the planet of trauma and change. All right, still a bit vague. We go one step further. We say when Saturn and Pluto come together, that occurs about every 38 years they aspect each other about every 38 years.
Yep.
And if we go back 38 years from 2020, we get 1982. You might say, well, so what? What happened in 1982?
Really bad fashion.
Sorry?
Really bad fashion. Was it Leg Warmers?
Yeah. Leg Warmers, big hair, big shoulders. Yeah. I was playing in rock bands in Sydney in that period, so I was I was probably looking like that. I probably had a mullet back then. What we've got then is the Saturn, which is in combination with Pluto, is a very hard combination. It usually means hard labor, coldness. It's pretty malefic combination. And so last time we had the 1982. What happened in 1982? AIDS.
Yeah.
The AIDS epidemic took off big time.
Yeah, my parents split up too.
Oh well, personalised for you too. But so we had a pandemic back then. We had a pandemic then, and we get a pandemic now. I'm not saying before that in 1944 we didn't have a pandemic. We had the Holocaust, the height of the Holocaust in Europe. In other words, what it shares in common, it might not affect the whole world. It shares hardship and cruelty and hard labour and heaviness. That's what it really is about. The Jupiter just didn't help. Jupiter tend to expand it. Now, we're about to get a cat attempt to walk on my keyboard if we're not careful. You know, cats love getting in between you and your computer.
No, that's all right. Mine are out and about some days.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how these things line up, and actually, you know, they do line up with all
Yep,
sorts of stuff.
they do.
Keep going.
Okay, that's just an example of mundane
Yeah.
astrology, not bringing it down to anybody's personal birth chart. There's another thing called, if you want to bend towards free will, a thing called electional astrology, where you choose the auspicious time to do things. You might
Okay.
Queen Elizabeth I, not the second, but Queen Elizabeth I had an astrologer named John Dee back around the 1500s. John Dee was into everything. He was into necromancy. He was doing all sorts of wacko things, but he was also an astrologer. And he picked the most auspicious time for her coronation. And then he said, we can't. Then he said, no, we're going to have to delay it another 10 minutes. So there was something I hadn't checked. So, yeah, her coronation was elected. It was an elected time for her coronation.
That's interesting.
Now, how good she was or how good her thing was, we might debate the details, but generally she had a long, successful reign as a powerful woman back in the 1500s. So there was something to be said that you could choose an event and it would be born to you symbolically and potentially have, you know, nice combinations in it and try to diminish the bad one. You can't really get a perfect chart. There's always going to be a few bogeymen in there. Everybody's birth chart's like that. Some people have got it heavier than others. That we might make the assumption, could be a wrong assumption here, that you chose the chart before you came here anyway. Yeah, any pre-life or reincarnation or any of these sort of things, if they're part of the reality for us all, then it's possible that you chose the hardships in your chart to challenge yourself, and just how and your free will now is how you're handling them. But you don't get much free will as to whether they're going to happen or not. That's probably the freaky bit for most modern thinkers.
Yeah, what do we sign up for? So in the old days, they took this really high-rating people in the government and all that. They took this really seriously, and they used to use it.
That's right, and that's why I said it's only been a trend in the probably last 100 years for everybody and anybody to get their birth chart looked at. Basically, a couple of thousand. The Romans basically it was a criminal offence to seek out your own. To do your plebs birth chart. It was always the chart of the emperor and the chart of the country. Same with the pharaohs and things like that. It was treated like it was only for a certain class of people.
Yeah. Well, not much has changed, but apart from us being able to get it done. But that's amazing.
We got a question here. It says from Kathleen Connor saying, "Do you actually know which exact signs go together?" Signs, I mean, we could talk what I call pop astrology and say most people know their sign because it's their sun sign. It's where we take a regular path around the sun and it doesn't deviate. It looks like the sun's going around us in a circle, and it just goes at the same rate. So it's the only thing that based on a date, that you can rely that every year on the 10th of March every year, the sun is going to be at 19 degrees of Pisces in the circle of 360 degrees. So we've all got caught up in the last 50 years, not only with the cult of personality and getting our birth charts done and looking how wonderful we are, very sort of like egocentric sort of astrology, but we've also got caught up in the idea of sun signs. And so what I call pop astrology, where we say, what sign are you? And that's fun. You can have a thing. Some people are very typical of their sun sign, but most people have charts that are far more complex, and that sun sign will only shine out a little bit, possibly. But to answer Kathleen's question, you could say signs are compatible with other signs. Doesn't mean you're compatible because you're that sign with somebody else in that sign. Yes, it's a little way along the sliding rule to saying there's a bit of compatibility there. And so we have 4 elements. We have fire, air, earth, and water, which is the basis of a lot of ancient philosophies and even ancient medicine. Hot and cold, wet and dry. These are the temperaments of people. And so we could say that... for instance, what's your sun sign, Brooke? What day do you? Virgo. September or August?
4th of September.
Okay, 4th of September.
Aquarian rising, I think. Oh, that's my
right. And that's quite a contrast, because Aquarius and Virgo, if we say the sun was in Virgo when you were born.
Yep.
180 degrees away from that would be the sign of Pisces.
Yep.
So people born roughly 6 months either side of you would have their sun in Pisces. That's the sign opposite, but opposite signs aren't necessarily opposite. They do have some things in common. And one thing they share in common, Virgo is what you call an earth sign.
Yep.
So that means it's basically practical, down to earth, grounded. Whether you are or not, I'm not saying, but this is what the sign of Virgo is like. Virgo is methodical. You're born on the 4th. Now, this is a bit of numerology here. Shouldn't bring it in, but the number 4 is number 4 is a number of structure and systems. So that's why you might be good with technology or hands-on stuff too. And so you've got this common sense Virgo with a 4, which is very similar to Virgo in a sense. They have a lot in common, number 4 in numerology and Virgo. But your Aquarius rising, the time of day you were born, and the whole zodiac goes around in a 24-hour period, and every 2 hours of the day a sign of the zodiac rises on the horizon, and we need the birth time, latitude, and longitude to determine what degree of what sign was rising when you're born. And the rising degree, or ascendant sign as we call it, or rising sign, is what we base the chart on. The whole chart goes from that point. So your rising sign is, if not more important than your sun sign. And Aquarius is the sign that's next to Pisces, and they're the ones that are most different from each other. Everybody has a sign. The sign opposite is different in ways, but not totally.
The ones either side of the opposite.
The ones either side are the most different. So if you were the really typical Virgo, then a really typical Aquarian would be quite opposite you in a sense.
Yep.
But you're made of both. They don't cancel each other out. Your sun's in Virgo. Your sun's in Virgo, which could be the basic person, but the Aquarius rising probably means that even if you were the Virgo, methodical, common sense, grounded, 4-day, hands-on, good with hands sometimes, this sort of thing, the Aquarius rising still brings an outer face that you're going to show other people, the type of body you have, the type of things that happen to your body, because the ascendant relates more to the physical. Then you're a Virgo in an Aquarian body, and Aquarius is a sign that is an air sign, much more mental and philosophical, much more inclined to want to see where things can go, how far you can take them. Aquarians have a sense, a detachment. What they both share in common is that Virgo is sensible and has common sense, but Aquarius is detached and an observer, and quite often is philosophical and see the big picture. So they could work together at times, but there's not a particularly emotionally. I don't know where your moon is. Wherever somebody's moon is quite often what their emotional sensitivity is like, because the moon is the feminine, reflective planet, partner of the sun. It's very sexist astrology. You have a male sun and a female moon, and the moon tends to be wherever your moon sign is where you tend to feel at home, feel comfort, emotional sensitivity. And if your moon just happened to be in Aquarius as well, that would really push the Aquarian a lot more, because the two of them are in there. Even we're still talking general stuff here, and we're talking character traits, which are all very fun to a degree. We're talking a little bit of pop psychology going on here, but sorry,
that's pretty much me. I mean, I'm very structured, but I'm very philosophical and
well,
stuff.
So, if you were triple Virgo, I don't think you'd be doing this show.
No,
because Virgo. One thing about Virgo is they're quite often conservative, not radical. I don't mean politically conservative, but just So So this is the Aquarian. We're seeing the Aquarian,
Virgo here,
but we're seeing maybe somebody who's more methodical, or Aquarius. If you read sun sign astrology books, Aquarians get a bit of a good beat up, because the modern astrologer thinks, and they're wrong, the modern astrologer thinks that Aquarius is ruled by the planet Uranus. When we say a planet is ruled by a sign, what we're saying is a planet has an affinity or has something about its principles that sit well with some of the signs as that. This is why as the planets go around the signs, they're either happy or not happy as they're visiting each sign, and they're weak and strong. Well, Uranus was discovered in the in 1781. Prior to that, there was only planets out to Saturn. You could see them with the naked eye. The system worked perfectly well without Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Along came 3 new planets. Now we're getting Sedna, Eris. We're getting all sorts of name things that are right out and past the Kuiper belt somewhere. To me, they're interesting, but they're not that relevant to astrology. And people out there might be freaking and be saying this because a lot of people will be saying, oh, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are so important. Well, they are. They are when they're in your chart and they cross things and they bump into you. Oh, yeah, they're very, very important. But they don't show so much in your character, and they don't show so much thing. Uranus is a planet of disruption, radicalness, eccentricity, change, disruption. It's a disruptive planet. It can be positive in the sense of being inventive and original. So Aquarius, being ruled by Uranus, tends to get this beat up. When you read sun sign books, it says Scorpio's emotionally intense, penetrating, a bit destructive because they're ruled by Pluto and all this. You get all this description, and you get Aquarians zany, eccentric, inventive, original. Yeah, most Aquarians I know, Aquarius was traditionally ruled by the planet Saturn. Saturn is not zany. Saturn is dead serious. Saturn is objective. Saturn comes from Satan. Saturn was the angel that fell to earth and didn't like being here in mythology. Landed here and went, oh, what is this? Where am I here? Well, I think always felt like that. So Aquarians, typical Aquarians, you might not be, but typical Aquarians tend to be detached and tend to have a certain amount of aloofness about them. Now, there's another sign, Capricorn.
I'm a little bit like that. I can be a bit like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it makes you objective. The beauty of Aquarius is it gives you the big picture and it can make you quite objective. So anything nice I say about you, everybody will go, yeah, that's me. But basically, Aquarius is like that. So it comes from this idea that Uranus is connected with it, which really brought in a trace of Aquarians that weren't around until Aquarius was never described like this until after the 20th century, and so Aquarius was traditionally a philosophical, detached observer sign, fairly objective, fairly steady. Along came Uranus, the very disruptive, eccentric planet, and suddenly Aquarians were zany extroverts. Well, no, sorry, don't agree. But that's another story. What's this question? There's another question popped up here. Was it Stathi Spanos? Stathi Spanos says, was there anything significant in the stars in 2000? There is always something. If you want to look,
was there a big star? Was it?
Big stars come from generally from conjunctions of planets, where planets not only are in the same sign at the same degree, but they're also at the same latitude, which they don't necessarily do. They go around in a path called the zodiac, but they're not always on the same level. Depends, but sometimes they'll actually come and do that, and that's like they're eclipsing each other. So when they eclipse each other, they look bigger. And I'm not making a religious statement here, but we could say the 3 wise men were following a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. They already knew where there was going to be one, and by their exact latitude, so the star looked bigger, and they followed the star because they knew who would ever be born, especially in a part of the world where this was focused most, that whoever would be born with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it's not that uncommon, would be special in some way. So this is what the Bible talks about. I'm not preaching here. This is this is probably just what that basis of the 3 wise men is all about. They're astrologers. They just don't want to say they are anymore. So I don't know about 2000. There is actually, you could, because I don't look a lot of mundane astrology, but there's usually, back in February of 1962, there was a whole lot of planets in Aquarius, roughly the same degree. Lee Oswald's daughter was born in February 62, but she hasn't turned out to be anything particularly obvious in the world. But she had a lot of planets all focused in one area of the chart, which can either be good or bad, I suppose. Another question here was, so if I'm from Michelle saying, so if I'm an Aquarius Venus, does that make me detached in love matters? Well, yeah, it's one. It's one. If you read Venus in Aquarius, you'd say Venus is about love and romance and about sensuality and things. And in Aquarius, it could be a little bit objective, a little bit sort of detached. Now, I'm not saying you are, Michelle, but Venus, that would be one statement. You'd say that, but you'd have to see it repeated in a number of times in the chart before we go out on the limb and say, "Whoa, yeah, this is some cool lady."
Yeah.
She's I think. I mean,
it could
if
just
you
be
want,
a tendency that shines.
that's right.
Happens sometimes.
Yeah. If you want to general talk, party talk, we can say one of the most famous Aquarian women is Germaine Greer. And so for the whole concept of feminism, the whole concept of thing, it's got that Aquarian objectivity and not so much assertiveness, but that whole less, without sounding sexist here, without that more emotional moon or some other thing really turning up the sensitivity. Not saying she was insensitive, but as a general person, she was an observer. She could philosophize about and write. So yeah, Germaine Greer, archetypal Aquarian woman in a sense. Yeah. Another question here: is it true that Jesus was born in March? I don't know. You could say that the most evidence supports that Jesus was born around 3 BC, 3 years before what we call the turnover point, and you could say he was a Virgo around September because there's lots of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction occurred in September of 3 BC. So if the three wise men were following that star, then just like Brooke, Jesus was a Virgo maybe. So you could say Jesus.
I don't know him.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jesus was born in March. It says she's asking born in March. Maybe that's because it's the sign. The Christian symbol is the sign of the fish. I don't know why I'm talking so much Jesus because I know not much about it, and I'm not anti either. But basically, the sign of the fish in the zodiac, we have ages. We've got our planets going around the sun.
Yep.
In the sun taking a year to look like it's gone around the Earth. We have Pluto taking 284 years to go around the sun. We have them all out the thing. This is the astronomy. But our whole solar system is also going around galactic center. It's also revolving around the galactic center, which is somewhere correlates in a part of a black hole somewhere in Sagittarius. In the constellation of Sagittarius is a black hole, and we're rotating around that, getting nearer and nearer over time. Lovely thought. But either way, we go around about every 26,000 years around our thing, and so basically we have about every 2,000 years they call it an age. And so during the Christian era, it was the Age of Pisces. We are technically not in the age of Aquarius, believe it, much as we have all the 60s stuff singing about it and the hippiedom. Technically, we're not mathematically in the age of Aquarius yet, and there's not even an agreement exactly, when what we call the Vernal Equinox, 21st of March, the beginning of spring in the Northern Hemisphere, will correlate with the very beginning of Pisces or the end of Aquarius. That's when it moves backwards. It's called the precession of the equinoxes. Yep. And subsequently, every 2,000 years, roughly, not exactly, there's the vernal equinox is in a sign of the zodiac, and it's been in Pisces for a long time. It still is now. It's about 7 degrees of Pisces at this point in time, so we're still a way off.
So our lifetime's going to still be Pisces.
Yep. And you could say, oh, what does that mean? Well, again, there's no hard stuff about this because it's just a general. It's called the Age of Pisces. Yeah. And whether or not it's a coincidence that Christianity began around the beginning of age when Pisces came in, and thereby the symbol of the fish is the Christian symbol usually. A fisher of men, I think he was described as. Yeah. Another question from Samantha. What's the best chart style to study or learn? Western, sidereal, etc. What's most accurate? Okay, somebody's aware of a sidereal zodiac here. Okay, I did Hindu astrology for many years. The sidereal zodiac is the zodiac based on the constellations. You might think the Western zodiac is based on the constellations. There was a point in time with the precession of the equinoxes about 2,000 years ago that on the 21st of March in the northern hemisphere, not even taking the southern hemisphere, is not even around at that point. There's no consciousness of the southern hemisphere back in that period of time. But at the 21st of March every year, if you'd watch the sunrise on the 21st of March that day, you would see the sun come up at a particular point on the horizon. As the seasons went on, that sun would rise further to the right or left of its position, basically north or south, even though it looks like it's east-west. Technicality. They were able to say, oh, okay, on the 21st of March every year, we can say the sun's going to come up at that exact point. That's how calendars and everything come about. But they also noticed that the constellation of Aries around that time, the beginning of the constellation of Aries, was coinciding. If you'd seen the sun come up, and if you were able to see the sun come up and there were stars behind it, the sun would have been in the constellation of Aries. Since that point in time, those constellations, the sun is now the sun on the 21st of March is in about 7 degrees of Pisces now, because of our revolvement around galactic center, they've shifted. So the signs, sorry if I'm losing anybody here, but the signs of the zodiac, which were based on the constellations, but meaningfully, they don't have any really meaningful connection to them. It was just a measuring point. It was decided that the 21st of March was the beginning of the year, and it was right up to about the 1500s or so, until the Julian calendar came in, or Gregorian calendar. I've forgotten which one it is. But the sun, they would have said, okay, the sun correlated with the rising with Aries on the horizon at the same time, but now it's 7 degrees of Pisces. It's gone back about 2/3 of one sign over that 2,000 year or see. So what we call the Sidereal Zodiac was dividing the sky based on the constellations, and what we call the Tropical Zodiac, which is what Western astrologers tend to use, is a 12-fold division into 30-degree segments. It's symbolic. It's not literal. It's a symbolic thing. It is partly based on astronomy, but it's a division of the sky into 12 things, just like using a ruler to measure. And so we can say the sun on the 21st of March every year, no matter where you are in the world, the sun is in the sign of Aries, but in fact it's in the constellation of Pisces. And don't freak out when somebody, Samantha, don't freak out. It's not going to contradict anything. The Hindu Vedic astrology goes with the Sidereal Zodiac and takes that into account. But really, when you study Hindu astrology, it's got a lot of different things. You almost put that hat on, read the chart that way, take that hat off and put on the Western chart and read the chart that way, and you come up with much the same results. It's just going to sound very unscientific, but basically we are looking at the hard yards done in any system. Will probably, when you put the hard yards into it, you'll see the consistency and it'll work for you. It doesn't work just from skimming over it. So you will get a contradiction. So if Samantha, you were born with the sun in Western sign, it's possible in the Hindu sidereal sign, the one before. Not always. If you're born late in the sign, it'll still be back. It'll still be at the beginning of the same sign. It goes back about 23 degrees out of 30 degrees. Yeah. I know it can sound a bit confusing, and let's not get into the debate of it's wrong or right. It isn't wrong or right. They both work very well, having done them both. You just have to put the hat on, read it that way, take that hat off. Don't confuse yourself. And so when we talk of coming back to the other person's question, I was going to answer about compatibility of signs. We have fire, air, earth, and water. And so Virgo is an earth sign. I'm a Pisces, which is a water sign. What the Virgo shares earth signs with Taurus and Capricorn. So somebody with their sun, or a lot of being very typical Virgo, and somebody who's very typical Capricorn or Taurus would have earth in common, and the elements sit well with each other. So they all share that earth, but they'll still have differences, of course. So a simple superficial thing is saying, if you're a particular sign, you look at the signs for the same element. So fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius go together. Water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces go together. Air signs, Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius. And earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And basically, we're still talking incredibly pop astrology here to even say anything serious about that. But it's just that's the compatibility. But what you're really looking for with compatibility with somebody is that your sun on the 4th of September is probably around 15 degrees of Virgo. It's probably smack in the middle of Virgo somewhere. You'd be looking for somebody whose maybe moon is at 15 degrees or around there of Virgo. And that means their moon, their emotional feelings are drawn to you, your sun, your power, your life force. If their Venus was on your sun, they may love you or be or feel attracted to you. And this is what we haven't talked about yet, but Brooke and I were talking about beforehand, was simply how your natal chart is there with compatibility with somebody else. But yes, there's people you'll pass on the street every day with probably great compatibility with you, but you don't meet them. Reality hasn't intruded. Nothing, all the other things being equal, nothing happens. But there will be a time where your chart moves on from its natal chart. It develops over time. Planets symbolically move on and literally move on, and they start making aspects, aspects means an angle or a distance away from another planet in your own chart. And we might hear astrologers saying, oh, at the age of 24, Mars is going to conjunct your Saturn. And that would have a particular meaning for that. In that year, there may be some Mars-Saturn combination thing, which, by the way, is a crisis. Mars-Saturn is a shocker of a combination, but they're the two malefics, what we call planets that are most likely to create tests for you and challenge you. And of course, it's relative. If you're pretty together in your life, you don't have to be rich or poor, but if you're pretty together in your life, that Mars-Saturn might be a challenging year that helped you grow. It might be the year that made or broke you and said, okay, what didn't kill me made me stronger. If you're already down the gurgler, I'm not casting nasturtiums here, you're already on the street, you're homeless, or you're drugs or alcohol, whatever like that, that Mars-Saturn might take you out because it might actually have its more effects because you're more vulnerable. So I guess what I'm saying to you is that your free will in this life is how you dealt with these lessons, how you understood them, what your free will allowed you to move within the event. The event itself is almost neutral, as bad as it might appear to happening to you. It's almost neutral. It's really just what you've learned and grown already and bring to the table at that time. So astrology is a mixture of free will and it's a mixture of fate. It's hard to reconcile some of that. Yeah.
So you were talking have you got any other, like you were talking about JFK, is there any other amazing things that you looked into like that? Because people
it's like when you go in the video shop and try to pick a video, or you go and or you're on Netflix. You go to Netflix and you end up not choosing anything. You've looked at everything and get off it before you even choose anything. Oh, I do. I do. I know that. There's some very strange things in astrology. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, you could say a skeptic could say that they're working. I'll give you a really strange example, and there's not a lot you can do with this on a practical sense, and yet it's really strange. Between Mars and Jupiter, there's maybe an ex-planet that broke up at some point in time, or maybe it never came together as planets form. This is the astronomy. There's a thing called the Asteroid Belt. The Asteroid Belt's full of chunks of rock, tiny little ones. Some of them have come our way. One of them might have even wiped out the dinosaurs at some point in time. Whatever. There's about 4 ones that are really big: Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta. The naming of most of the asteroids comes from Greek mythology or Roman mythology. This was what the astronomers, not the astrologers, were doing. When they discovered a new piece of rock, they'd give it a name. They had a number for it for a while, and then they eventually give it a name. They ran out after a while of all these mythological names because when they wanted to identify an object, even if it was just a chunk of rock, they ended up giving it a name. Now, the funny thing about naming them, the astronomers, whether unconscious or not conscious of this, probably, often would name, there probably is an asteroid named Brooke.
Yep.
Probably is. There's at least 13,000 chunks of rocks that have been named already by astronomers. These chunks of rocks can also be put into your birth chart. There's not much point in doing this because we don't know what they mean. But why I'm telling you this story is that Princess Diana dies in a car crash in 1997. Terrible. I picked terrible events to talk about, but she dies in the car crash in 1997. Asteroid Diana in mythology is the something like the fawn running through the forest or escaping or running away from something. So Asteroid Diana was running away from something. She was exactly at the same degree as Asteroid Mercedes, which is the car she was in. Right? And they were all conjunct a star called Regulus. And Regulus is the king star, the royal star. It's a star of royalty, of being a really powerful leader, of having eminence. So it's a simple story. We say running away in a Mercedes from royalty. You might turn that sentence around and say something else.
I know, but it's
Now
statistically,
so it's there a thing in her own birth chart at the time. Go one step further. John Denver. John Denver dies in a plane fall. John Denver's father was an aerial acrobat. He loved, taking the planes up and doing it, and thereby John Denver developed a hobby of this too. John Denver dies when in his own natal chart, the 8th house, which is the house of death, has other meanings, more positive meanings, but it is the house of death, whether it's good or bad. John Denver's son in his chart is in the 8th house natally. And it's at the same degree as Asteroid Icarus. Now, Asteroid Icarus is the fellow who flew near the sun and fell into the sea. John F. Kennedy Jr. has a similar theme. He crashed into the sea in a plane too. So again, it's just a simple statement saying that in John Denver's natal chart was one meaning you could say about having his son in the 8th house and the death house conjunct Icarus, so that he might die crashing into the sea. And he did. So it's benefit of hindsight. You wouldn't put all these asteroids in your birth chart looking for them, because you could fill up the whole 360 degrees with at least 20 or 30 at every degree. So there's other asteroids there that didn't say anything to you. My second marriage was to a lady named Penelope. And in my natal chart, asteroid Penelope, not my first marriage, my second marriage, is sitting right on the most sensitive point for marriage called the sun-moon midpoint in the marriage house. Mind you, I could have looked at maybe 5 or 6 other women's names, and I didn't marry them who were at that degree at the time. So again, it's not wonderful, but it's strange. It's symbolically strange, and there's not a lot you can do with it. It's a bit of a party trick. Speaking of party tricks, back in the 1600s, the most famous, probably English astrologer was a guy called William Lilly. William Lilly was the big daddy of horror astrology too. And he would have he would basically sit in his consultation room, and people would come throughout the day asking him questions. Will I obtain the parsonage, or should I buy Master B's house, or something like that? People come and say, and he didn't have an accurate watch at the time. When he got in the morning, he'd go out and look at the sundial. He'd work out what time it was, local time where he was in England, in country England. And somebody would come in, and he knew that 5 minutes had passed. So he knew in his head roughly how far he could move the planets in that 5 minutes. He'd knock up a chart for that. Then he'd knock up another chart for the next customer, and the chart would move throughout the day. And they'd all have different questions, different charts. But one of his party tricks was people would come in and he'd say, "Sir, you have a black wart on your left buttock. And they'd say, what? You have a black wart on your left buttock. How did you know this, sir? Have you been peeping through my window? It was a little party trick he did that he could see where scars and moles were on people's body just from the chart that he had to look at for them. He'd do this so that they go, oh, there's something in this strange subject matter. I know I'm talking trivia, real trivia here.
Yeah.
But this was his party trick to sort of like say, well, if you weren't peeping from my window, how did you do this? One day, a fish was stolen. He got a really nice big fresh fish from somewhere. He put it in his larder and he went to get it later on and it wasn't there. And he realised his fish had been stolen. So he did a chart. He knocked up a chart, where is my fish? And the symbology he came to was that his fish was in a southeasterly direction. Yep. It was near water. This is all the symbology of the planets talking to him at the time. And that the thief had red hair. Now, that's pretty much going. What he did, he went to the local magistrate, and the magistrate, he had such respect in the town, the magistrate came with him until they went to a number of suspects' places and found the fish with the red-haired man. He didn't want to press charges. He was just glad he was right. The guy had eaten half of it already, or anything like that. He didn't end up prosecuting the guy. He just wanted to prove himself right because he was practicing. So horror astrology can do lost objects. Yeah. And I don't want to get everybody excited at the moment. Oh, gosh, you're going to find my lost object. There are whole lost objects.
Yep. Keep going. We've got you back.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, we're back. Lost objects are, you can basically say, okay, the object's near, it's still in the house. Oh, it's near Venus, so it's near something soft. Is it in your clothing? And the person goes and checks the pockets, and there it was, this sort of thing. Yep. But a lot of time, lost objects are never found. Another one is, where is the cat? Cats aren't lost objects. Cats have a will of their own, and they can disappear for days on end. The real question probably most people are asking is not where is the cat, because if the cat's 2 miles away and dead, that's not very helpful. But if the cat, will the cat come back? Or will I see the cat? Yeah. And by a combination of symbolism, where the planet representing the cat at that time is in an earth sign, that means it's on the ground. Is it near the beginning sign, or it's near a wall? There's all this strange little wacko sort of symbology that you can pull out until you narrow it down. Now, you could be wrong or right, and sometimes people don't get to verify it anyway, because it can work quite well at times. So they're the sort of things you can do. These is really strange things. I don't want to get everybody so excited that they're all contacting me to find their lost ring or whatever. But there's a question should be generally serious and heartfelt with a horary, so that you can sincerely look at it. Because in a sense, it's almost like it's divination. And the word divination comes from consulting the divine. In other words, saying, whether you call it God, whether you call it the universe, whether you call it spirit, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But you're basically saying, I really need to know, can somebody help me with some direction or advice here? Now, most people have more meaningful questions. They don't really want to say, where is the cat? They want to say, where's my life going? Or what sort of job should I go for? Your natal chart can indicate that sort of thing, but your natal chart was around, 30, 40 years ago. You need to do a combination of other techniques to look at the current period. And one common thing that astrologers do is a thing called transits, planetary transits. We're looking at the planets in the sky now, and we're seeing how they're compatible with your birth chart. And we can say, okay, you've got an opportunity, but it won't be till October. You can do all you like about it now, but I think you'll find that you're frustrated until then, and then things will move quickly for you. Yes, Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is about to hit your career point in your chart, but it's not till October. That might not fit common sense. That might not fit reality for the person who really wants the job tomorrow, but it might turn out to be the case. Predicting that you're in a better, it'll happen, but it's nothing. Will I get the job? Yes, you will, but you wish you hadn't. Will I get the job? No. Somebody else is already acting in the position. All these sort of things can be done with Hori astrology, and to a certain degree with your natal chart and other types of charts. But Hori's good because it's surgery. It drills down just for the input, just for the question.
So is that what you do when you do your private sessions? Is that what you use most?
I mainly do Horis, but a lot of people don't. This is chicken and egg because a lot of people don't know about Hori and thereby don't know they can ask a question. When I'm at a fair where you saw me, what I tend to do is mainly card readings, tarot readings, tarot cards and Lenormand cards. Lenormand cards are great little cards for picking up trivia and very fortune telly, very, very earthly. Tarot cards tend to be a lot more symbolic and give you more better guidance on what to do about things. So if you came to me and sat in front of me and said, I'm just lost, I'm lost in life at the moment. I really need some direction. I would do the tarot because that will help me say, okay, just like you were saying, that's what you do, Brooke. It would tend to give you guidance. Oh, yes, you've got this, but this is what you really should be focusing on. You shouldn't be going in boots and all. You should be being compassionate or something like that. It'll give you guidance on how things. So there's the bit that's probably a bit more spiritual, a bit more helping. The Lenormand cards will sometimes say, okay, that's the message for you, but just be careful because you're going to have to protect your money anyway or something like that. We can bring it down to some everyday sort of stuff like that. The astrology is somewhere between the two. And the Hori astrology is very good for answering just that question. So at a fair, somebody may come to me and sit down. I tell them what I do and give them a choice. Most people don't have a specific question. It doesn't have to be a burning question, but they don't have a specific question. So what they tend to do is have a card reading, and sometimes the card will answer what they're looking for anyway. But one example I had some weeks ago at a fair, I was at Golden Grove sitting there. I'd done a Hori. I have a Sunday spot at the Crystal Wave shop most Sundays if I'm not doing a fair. If a fair's, and so a bit of promotion here. You can catch me at the Crystal Wave shop and book in with me on the Sunday, the one at the end of Grange Road, Crystal Wave. You can. Pete, yeah, that's right. And you can ring Pete and he takes my bookings, or whoever's in there will take the booking. So you can book ahead. You can turn up on the day, and sometimes I've got spots. But I tend to do tarot and Lenormand readings for most people because it's immediately then and there. But I say to people, if you have a burning question that you're quite clear about and you're ready for the answer, positive or negative, you're ready to let go of it in a sense, any investment in it, and you just think, then I'll do a Hori. But I won't do a Hori as a norm because if somebody's going, I'm not sure I want to know, or, I can't articulate my question, you don't do a Hori. Hori really relies on consulting the divine, letting go of it, and there's a certain amount of respect and deference you should have for it. William Lilly had techniques for finding out who was faking him out. In other words, if you got young guys coming in who are just mucking him around, asking stupid questions, he could look at the chart and say, this chart is not fit to be read. You are wasting my time, so get out of here. But that's another story. So I use my astrology. I use my tarot, my Lenormand to give guidance. I can use the astrology to give guidance, but really the astrology is without. And some other astrologer might be a great counselling astrology. They might be a great psychological astrologer. They might be only using astrology in tandem with a lot of other techniques. I'm probably looking at prediction with the astrology, bad or good. Let's not pull any punches. The tarot is sometimes like that. You get some shocker cards come out in the tarot sometimes, and there's no avoiding the tower most of the time when it comes right up the front of your reading. The S is going to hit the fan whether you like it or not. You just need to be prepared for it. That's more the point. So I would say my philosophy would be to talk about the mundane, the everyday stuff that people can grapple with, and then move into any sort of counselling. But I'll cut it off at a certain point and say, much as I care, much as I'm a qualified Myers-Briggs assessor, the Enneagram, things like that. I love those tools for looking at people's behaviour and psychology. But personally, I will refer you to somebody else after a certain point in time. So, in other words, without saying I don't care, I've had to harden the whole thing and say I do what I do, but if you really want to know why your life's in a mess at the moment, I'm probably not the person to tell you, other than to say, well, you went through this bad period then, you're still in a bad period till then. This is timing.
Yep.
And the astrology is good for timing. That's where it's probably its forte.
Now,
is.
You're also a lecturer for.
I have, but yeah, I do. In the astrology, I run a couple of WA courses a few times a year. One is Intro to Traditional Astrology, which usually has a mixture of people who know some astrology or absolute beginners. So it's more of just an intro, a taster. And then I hope that if they've done that, they can attend my Intro to Horary, which is a bit more specialized. But you can still, I had one recently where I just ran the Horary without the Intro to Trad before it. So that's at WA. I do teach. I'm getting my house ready at the moment to run classes here, so I hope to be able to, in 2022 to be teaching people either traditional astrology or horary astrology or both. I have been, as I said, I give talks. It was only last Saturday that I was at the FAA giving a talk on the assassination of JFK, because I finally, after many years of researching both subjects, I finally got to open my mouth and let the stream of consciousness go and try not to swamp them with too much information on that one. But to look at Oswald's chart astrologically. Was he the patsy or the assassin, this sort of thing. And so that's
online courses. Do you do online courses?
I haven't set up. I haven't. Well, I can do readings like we are now. I could do Zoom readings and share the screen, and that's fine. And that's the way I'm thinking of teaching anyway, because it's great. That technology is great for, sharing the screen. Your mouse pointed, they can see the mouse moving on the chart. I just bought a new digital projector today. I've already had one for a while, but I've bought a much more updated one only today. I've got the equipment, so I'm hoping to run face-to-face classes as well. But I think it's probably gonna end up being online. I haven't created an online course content-wise at this point in time. I'd need to pull my finger out and get all that content together before I ran that. But certainly I could do it live, like we're doing there. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do people get in contact? How do people get in contact with you? This is
okay. All right. Best is probably phoning. I know some, a certain generation might not want to phone, but phoning is best because I can then say, you're looking for a natal chart. Yes, we can do this. You're not interested in natal chart, but you are interested in the current 5-year period. And we take your natal chart and we move it there. No, you've really got a specific problem you've got to deal with right now. Let's do. Is it a question? We'll do a horary. Is it not a specific question, but it's a number of questions? Let's do it. I'll do a card reading instead. So we'll move. So that's why I do card readings, because I'm not necessarily always doing astrology. I'm doing tarot and Lenormand as well. So people can contact me. Phone is best. If they email me, I'm happy. If they're only emailing me wanting to know what chart services I can provide, I can do that. With horaries, it's difficult to get it as an email, because even though the interesting thing about horary is the chart is drawn up for when I receive it, which is with an email, I might not have checked my email, being generation I am. I might not have looked at it for 2 days, and the person's freaking at the other end of the line because they haven't heard back from me. And they think the importance of the time they thought of the question was the right time. Yes, it's important when they thought of the question, or it's important when they decided to ask the question, but sometimes that's not instantaneous. Sometimes there's a delay. You get my answer machine on my phone too, and you freak out. You say, no, it doesn't matter. It's when it's come full circle to me. So you've let go of it, but I might be away overseas, and I come back and listen to my answer machine. Oh, there's a horary question there. Yes, it's clear. Look at my watch. Okay. Watch. Yeah. And that's right. So it's the time the astrologer receives the question. You will get some horary books will say it's the time you thought of the question, but that is a lot more. You might have been mulling over it for months before you decided I'm ready for the answer.
Yeah.
It's that readiness for the answer. It's that letting go that's crucial. It doesn't mean you can't ask a trivial question, though. I mean, questions should be important and should be heartfelt and meaningful. Usually they're the ones that work best with horary. But if, say, for instance, you're watching your favourite soapy on television, and the soapy season 2 finishes with your main character sitting in the dock, and the jury's just to pronounce whether they're off to jail or not, and the bloody thing finishes before you know. You might say later that day, will Johnson go to jail? Now, Johnson is somebody you don't know. He's a fictional character on some TV show. But you can still do a horary to represent which planet represents Johnson and which, is he going down? This sort of thing. So you can do that. It's just that most of the time it works better when it's you wanting to know. The third-party questions are not particularly ethical. Say, for instance, you said, is my wife having an affair? Now, you might have good reason to think that. And the chart will say yes or no, but would you act upon that? Like, in other words, like I'm acting like I'm going to give you the right answer and confident that horary works most of the time pretty well. It doesn't work 100%, but how much are you going to, you're going to live your life based on the fact that I said, yes, she is, you find out later I was wrong. I just didn't read the chart properly. It's not the chart, it's the astrologer makes a mistake. There's all these things come into it. So I know I'm watering down, but at least horary is a very good one you can test because it doesn't go that far ahead in time. Whereas a natal chart is a book. If you said to me, Kris, do my natal chart, I said, well, it could take me 5 minutes to knock it up in the computer, but it could take us days to even talk about it because it's like it's a whole chart read with a whole list of potentials from it. And you can burrow into it. People can get totally caught up with their own chart to how one, burrowing into it. And you might take up astrology purely to only look at your own thing. Is another couple of questions here I haven't dealt with.
That's all right.
How are we going for time there, Brooke?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. We got from DJ Tangent, we've got, hi, Kris, have you heard of human design? And if so, do you know much about it? No. I'm not sure what they mean by human design, but so if it's a definite, clear concept, no.
I've never heard of it.
I might have an opinion once I have an idea what it is, but I'm probably not informed on that one, so sorry about that. Michelle writes, this really is interesting. Can I ask about Ophiuchus? She's got Ophiuchus. Okay, this is a furphy. This is every so many years the press will come out saying astrology is rubbish because there's a 13th sign. And Michelle, if you just happen to be born somewhere around late Scorpio into Sagittarius, you might think that you are now Ophiuchus. I don't know even how you pronounce it even. I've only ever seen it in print. What that technically is that the signs, the constellations of the zodiac are like a belt. They're about 8 degrees wide. They're like a belt that appears to be around the Earth. And all our planets go through it. The sun goes through the middle of it. It's called the ecliptic. This is the path. This is why the planets don't go all over the sky. They only go a particular path, and that path is the path of the zodiac. There is part of another constellation around the November period, around this period now, time, where part of another constellation of Ophiuchus intrudes into the zodiacal belt.
Yep.
It's an astronomical problem. It's not an astrological problem. It has no relevance whatsoever. It's like saying we found another sign. Are there now 13 signs? We discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Are they relevant? We've got Sedna and Eris. Are they relevant? You can defy the traditional rules of astrology, which it did perfectly well up to about the 1700s. Complete system. The jury's out as to what thing, but I would say to the Ophiuchus is something that you only ever hear about from skeptics or from the press or somebody, and it's an old story. It just pops up every 10 years. It's not new news when you read this thing. It looks like it is because they're saying, you know.
Are you telling us the media's lying to us?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, they'll do anything. I mean, they're just playing with a subject that they can attack.
Yeah.
You know, that nobody's going to rush to defend, because most people don't know enough know astrology other than sun sign astrology, and thereby it's a bit of a fun parlor game to begin with, isn't it? You know, something we can have a giggle about. And
that's fascinating.
Yeah. So Michelle Ophiuchus is not relevant. You might get some astrologer who's looked into it and looked at the constellation and looked at the stars that are in it and said, "Oh, it's got these stars that connect back to Roman or Greek mythology," and then come up with a story for it. But really, it's like introducing more. You don't need to introduce more to a system that's already complete. And introducing Uranus in 1781, Neptune in 1848, and Pluto in 1930. Yes, they are relevant, but they're not relevant in the way to the degree that everybody makes them out to be these days. Yeah, it's just when they're in the chart, they might be sitting on your most sensitive degree of your chart. We don't ignore them; they're talking to us, and that's what astrology is about. You're looking at the chart and you're seeing what at that moment of time is talking to me. You might look at that chart another time, and yes, you'll come up with much the same results, but you'll see something you didn't see last time. That's just us. That's our foibles. But it's relevant that you saw it at that time. Good example, taking tarot, for instance. In the Rider-Waite tarot pack, which is the common or garden tarot pack that most people know, it's in most books, even though there's all sorts of tarot packs, there is the Queen of Pentacles. And the Queen of Pentacles is a dark-haired woman sitting on a chair with goats on the end of the thing. Yes, she has a connection to Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn. Doesn't mean the Queen of Pentacles is a Capricorn, but there's a connection to something Capricornian about the nature of the Queen of Pentacles. For years, I was reading that card, and even though you look at the cards, you forget what you saw in them at some point in time. And at one time, there was a pregnancy, a couple of other cards indicating pregnancy, but the thing that triggered it for me was the little white rabbit down one corner of the card. And I swear to you, I'd never seen that rabbit before. But it was right at the time, and the message I gave was right at the time. That was the information I was meant to impart to the customer or a client. And next time, I probably didn't tune into the rabbit again. It might have biased my reading of the Queen of Pentacles, but it's not normally a pregnancy card. But there is a white rabbit, and it might not be in other tarot packs that there's a white rabbit, but there was one on this occasion. So this is the weird phenomena of what you notice selectively and what you don't. Your own value judgments come into how you read for people. Sure, if I'm reading and I don't want to sound racist here, but if I'm reading from an African, can I even use the term now, pygmy? You know, a small person from an African tribe who may have been isolated for many years. How do we read the chart? We don't read it about his car, or we don't read it about their thing. We've got Western values creeping into it. It's very ethnocentric. It's almost like there's a universal truth that's going to apply to that pygmy as much as it applies to you and I. It's just that a lot of the books we read are written by Westerners about Western culture. So there's a sociological thing that can sometimes bias the astrologer as to what they're valuing and what they focus on too. And that's the bit where it falls down. Yeah.
Well, that's all we can do based on our experience. Give us the do the best we can do.
Yeah. Now I can talk under 6. You realise now I can talk under 6 feet of wet cement.
That's all right.
Much as I'm a sun sign Pisces, which is usually otherworldly and off the planet and dreamy and all this sort of thing. Yes, I am, but my rising sign is Aries, and Aries wants to do. wants to cut through things. So I call myself a fascist astrologer. I'm not politically right-wing in any way. If anything, I lean to the left politically, but I call myself a fascist astrologer. So in other words, if you're looking for something to give you a Pollyanna astrology, you're not on the wrong person to come to. Mind you, if things are good in the chart, I will say they are good in the chart, and you're going for it, you've got this opportunity. But I won't water it down. If it's there, I'll say it. But of course, I've got to be aware of tact. I've got to be aware of diplomacy. You don't want to give somebody a crushing message if they're already hitting rock bottom. I mean, that's the counselling part of it. Yeah. You want to keep it positive anyway. You want to help them grow. So that's behind it. But what the chart says is not necessarily nice some of the time. And so,
there's no point lying about the chart, is there?
Yeah, and when I was talking about talking so much, I have Gemini Moon. And Gemini is the Gemini is the sign ruled by Mercury. It's the communication sign. All you Geminis out there might not be talkative at all, but the sign of Gemini is a very chatty, sometimes superficial, loves novelty. And so some of the analogies I've given you in astrology are probably particularly novelty rather than...
Go on, tell us about Gemini. There's some Geminis in the crowd. Go on.
Oh, there's probably some Geminis. Well, the typical Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Actually, if you ever pick up sun sign books, there's been one around since the 60s, 70s, and 80s called Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. And you might love the book. You might have read your sign description and think, that's me to a T. Or you might say, nah, that's not even like me at all. The reason being is it's describing a whole lot of character traits that are quite psychological. They don't tend to say, well, Gemini is inclined to be have more than one partner because it's made of twins, and thereby there's duality going on. Literally duality happens with Gemini. Of all the signs that are most likely to be having extramarital affairs and not taking it very seriously, Gemini is that. You might never have read that in your positive sun sign book of Gemini. It's because these books that were written in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were written for a market of people reading their character, right? And yes, there's a lot of good character stuff you can get out of astrology, but it wasn't its forte. But the signs of the zodiac are secondary to the planets. The signs of the zodiac are like this. Well, imagine a planet is like an actor with his own character or her own character. That's always there. Mars is Mars. Mars is the god of war. Mars wants to fight. Mars wants to conquer. Mars wants to brutally beat you up and draw blood. Mars, when it's positive, wants to be courageous, bold, and think. When Mars is positive in your chart, you're a right action warrior. You tend to do things guided by ethics and morals, but you're going to fight for it. This is Mars. So somebody with very strong Mars in their chart, right up the front of the chart, even if they were a Virgo, or even if they were a Piscean like me, with a strong Mars up the front of the chart, that is what people are going to see. Compared to all the other Pisceans, this particular Pisces with the Mars up the front may be much more aggressive, assertive, in your face, because planets are what stand out in the chart. But they visit signs, and as they visit each sign, as they go around the circle, they are modified by the sign. And so you imagine the sign is like the costume they're wearing just for that moment. An actor goes on stage in a costume and plays a part for a while. Then they don't. And then the houses of the zodiac, which is the other 12-fold division, show what is the stage? Where is this playing out? My aggressive Mars is in my 6th house in the sign of Leo. Okay. My aggressive Mars is in a fire sign of Leo. So Mars is already hot and dry and fiery. It's in the sign of Leo. So Leo is a fixed sign who's proud, determined, can be assertive too because it's a fire sign. Yes. Mars is a fiery planet, so that's doubling up. There's somebody really well known, we already know, who has Mars in Leo right on their ascendant degree, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the archetypal Leo. He's a Gemini, in fact. Yep. Coming back to Gemini. His sun was in Gemini, which means he's probably why he loves the Twitter sphere, why he loves talking, why he loves little sound bites of superficial information. But his rising sign is Leo. and Mars is sitting right on that degree of the ascendant. And it so happens that Mars is in Leo at 29 degrees of Leo, and at 29 degrees of Leo is the fixed star Regulus. Remember I told you about Diana and royalty? Well, Donald Trump has Regulus right on his ascendant, which means he's going to be the king. I'm not saying he's a good king. He's just going to be the king. He's, in other words, in his natal chart, he's got this egotistical, narcissistic, aggressive planet. You might you might love Donald Trump, but that's another story. But his chart really clearly reflects what he appears to us to be. Now, he's a more complex person. He's going to have other things happening in life, but his natal chart is a good example of not only is he assertive, not is he assertive, things like that, but he's actually got a conjunct the fixed star Regulus, and that's only at 1 degree of the zodiac. So that zooms the volume up on royalty. So he's the man who's born to be king, in a sense. He might not be the royal family, but he would become the king at some point.
Oh, they're all from that bloodline, aren't they? When you do
So coming back to it, if you read we're all caught up with signs. In most non-astrologers are caught up with signs because we know our sun sign. So we get caught up with the importance of signs, but all the nature of any sign is really made up. You get the nature of any sign because it's a fire sign, because it's a lion, Gemini, because it's an air sign, because it's twins. Gemini is also what we call a mutable sign. There's another category called cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Mutable is versatile and adaptable. So Gemini is a air sign, mental, ruled by the planet Mercury, which Mercury is talkative, communicative, is neither male nor female. It's a bit androgynous to a degree. I'm not saying Geminis are androgynous, but Mercury's androgynous. It's a messenger. And so the typical Gemini is talkative, loves getting about, moving about everywhere. Usually has got too many irons of fire. When it's a problem, they've got scattered energies. When it's successful, they're versatile and adaptable. And so Gemini, and thereby when it comes to relationships, if you've got Venus in Gemini, Venus the planet of love in Gemini, well, it's not going to give you any ulcers because it's going to keep you light and always looking for something else. But it can manifest as Venus in Gemini, somebody who hasn't got a lot of depth at commitment either, commitment phobes, because Venus is the planet of love and bonding, and it's in a sign that's inclined to be looking here, there, and everywhere all the time. Yep. That's still talking general, but that's what you get the nature of a sign like Gemini from a mixture of these things. Yeah.
I knew there was more to it, but astrology, I never knew to what depth.
Yeah. Well, Virgo yourself, Brooke, are ruled by Mercury as well, but Gemini and Virgo are ruled by Mercury. But the difference is Gemini is an air sign. You've got air in the Aquarian rising, but Virgo's an earth sign. So your Mercury ruling Virgo is more mentally systemized, sensible, and earth like Mercury is thought, how you organize your thinking, communication, writing, and Virgo is methodical and precise and detail on it. Whereas Gemini is an air sign. Their Mercury is more thought. It's more just free floating. Yeah. It's not so grounded. I think other questions are popping up here. Okay. Michelle has asked another one. What is the benefit of having your chart professionally done as opposed to looking it up on a website? Well, where do I begin? When I say professionally done, I'm not advocating me, but I am saying to you that really you can knock up a chart on a website and it could even give you some sort of interpretation, but a computer does not know how to synthesize the information and put it together. It doesn't know how to weigh it up. It can say your Venus is in Gemini, but your Mars is in Taurus, and then you just read them as two separate things, and they might even contradict each other. They don't. The computer-generated delineation, it can be pretty crappy or pretty thick. So it requires somebody with experience to look at the chart and weigh it up and see, that's important, but that isn't. And it's synthesizing the information. So that would be a good reason to see a professional astrologer.
Otherwise, it'd be just like just getting a deck of cards and just putting the cards out if you haven't done a reading and reading the book.
Yeah,
You know,
just reading
same
each
sort of
book,
thing.
each card separately, and not knowing how to blend them together. Yeah, it can't do that. Another question after that from Cindy. Oh, Cindy's asked one. Does Chinese astrology factor into a birth chart? Well, Chinese have their own system of astrology based on animal, and I think that it isn't even based on the same constellations. It's a different circle. It goes around the North Star Polaris, and it's a circle drawn around that. So it has nothing to do with seasons. The Western Zodiac is based on the seasons we experience. Spring equinox, autumn equinox, solstice. Whereas Chinese astrology is a whole lot of constellations that are in a circle, but it's not the circle where the planets go. So Chinese astrology really doesn't look at planets moving through the sky. Chinese astrology looks at what is the time you were born, the month you're born, the day, things like that, that you're born in the hour of the dragon, in the month of the rabbit, in the year of the rooster, or something like that. And that thing. Now, there's a lot more to China. I don't want to demean it in any way. There's a lot more to Chinese astrology than that. It is a complete system, and there's a certain degree of, there's even 5 elements rather than 4 elements in Chinese astrology. So yeah, there is Chinese astrology. I only know a little bit about it. I haven't studied it much. There's Vedic or Hindu astrology, which is more similar to the traditional astrology I'm talking about. But it is based on a thing called the Sidereal Zodiac, because one lot of astrologers in the West went with the seasons, and another lot of astrologers in the East, in India, stayed with the constellations. And because they've now moved apart, we just get, unfortunately, possibly your sun signs moved. Most of the planets in your chart have moved back 1 sign in the Hindu chart. But as I say, at the beginning of that can present problems to the beginner or problems to anybody who's thinking with the doctrine of certainty that we've got to rely on one system and not another. It doesn't work that way. Eventually, astrology starts talking to you because you've picked up things beyond the astrology.
Yeah. Before we finish up, is there anything you want to add to letting people know about how they get into astrology or what?
I mean, there's a lot. There's some real. I can recommend good books. Right behind me, I've got 2 bookcases here and here full of. They're all astrology. I'm an Enneagram 5, which is a psychological tendency to devour things. So never feel you're ready, and keep reading more. Become the expert like that. So. I got too many books, and there's a lot of different points of view in them. But I've being a librarian as well, I've catalogued them into certain spheres and subjects. So there's a lot of good books out there. I can always, recommend ones. If you're looking to learn traditional astrology, there is a school here in Adelaide. I mean, I intend teaching it myself, not in competition with them, but there is already established school called Astro Mundi, ASTROMUNDI. 2 lovely ladies who run that, and they run a course that you can do an undergrad or a postgrad in what they do, and that's a school of traditional astrology. And when I say traditional astrology, it has a lot in common with modern astrology, but it deviates in certain ways, and it's really the astrology that predates the 1600s. Might sound a bit freaky or scary, but it's actually it's funny enough, it's a new boy on the block, simply because astrology disappeared in the 1700s. It came back repackaged by the Theosophical Societies and the whole New Age movement in the late 1800s. The original New Age movement, not what we call the modern New Age movement. And a lot of middle class Englishmen and Frenchmen came in contact with a lot of Eastern philosophies at the time and took them under the wing and incorporated. People like Aleister Crowley and a number of these people in the late 1800s took on, and a lot of the tarot, the Order of the Golden Dawn, all these groups of middle class people who could study these things came in contact with a lot of Eastern philosophies and took them under their wing, changed them a bit, suddenly brought astrology back under the wing, but they didn't have the literature that was around. They hadn't deciphered the ancient Greek, the ancient Egyptian, the Sumerian, or a lot of the stuff that was going on. it wasn't till about the 1990s that a whole lot of academic astrologers who were both academics started to translate this from an astrologer's perspective rather than somebody who knew no astrology to translate in the words. And there was a rich vein, a heritage in astrology that has been rediscovered. And so subsequently, what we call traditional astrology seems like the new boy on the block, because what we call modern astrology is anything from the late 1800s onwards that was had a certain philosophy. I'm not saying it was wrong or right, nothing wrong or right about it, but it threw the baby out with the bathwater when it got rid of prediction, or it disfavored prediction, because it didn't fit the modern mindset, science. It didn't fit Christianity and religion, which already had a problem with it, and it didn't fit science. And it didn't fit science and the materialist view of the world. So it's astrology. Yeah, there's bits of it that stand up to statistical testing, and the work of Paul Westran. If anybody wants to Google Paul Westran, West Westran, Paul Westran has done 36,000 cases of celebrity couples, statistically significant results showing when they form relationships and when they possibly even when they broke up as well, shows a lot of the time. And this
can't be right. 2 months.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's a complete just little subsection of astrology that has had a lot of things. He took his work to the scientists who were some years ago. There was some scientists in Perth where he's moved to, who were least receptive to astrology, to testing it. And eventually they found something in it, but they basically moved away from it. It was too much for their professional careers to even admit there was something in this. And subsequently, when Paul took his work to some of those people in Western Australia, they have suppressed it. They have reproduced some of his results. They've tried to find fault with his methodology. So if you want any scientific evidence of astrology, Paul Westran is a good example of that. There was a French statistician in the 1950s called Michael Michel Gauquelin, and Gauquelin set out, his mother was an astrologer and he was a statistician. He had a little bit of sympathy for it. He basically, 100,000 cases, that found a correlation between certain planets and certain career choices. Certain planets in your chart, when they were just rising above the horizon or were just or directly over above, were statistically in a small corridor of degrees. If Mars was there, you were most likely to be a surgeon or a soldier. If Jupiter was there, you're going to be an actor or a politician. Very strange combination. Is it actor and politician? Maybe there's something in that.
You think about it.
No, that's right. The moon for writers, funnily enough, even though the moon's technically not a planet in that sense, the moon for writers, Venus for poets and artists, and that's it. Oh, and Saturn for scientists and particular types of scientists who did heavy research and things like that. Surgeons were usually Mars because they cut things, because Mars is all about stabbing and cutting most of the time, reducing it down to its crudest point. The planets correlated with career choice, and especially eminence in career. If those planets were in a very tight little bunch of degrees, often eminence in a career. And admittedly, Gauquelin was looking at famous people because the French recorded birth times. So he had a lot of different data.
So he had a lot of different data.
So there was this thing. After that, a number of groups reproduced his work. Some of them tried again to kill it. They even doctored their results to say there was no correlation, and then they were found out to be they doctored their results. And to this day, Gauquelin found something very significant in astrology. He didn't find all of astrology, of course. He wasn't studying all of astrology. And a lot of astrology there's a lot of crap astrology out there. Just like there's a lot of crap conspiracy theories around. There's a lot of good, there's some decent stuff and there's some crap. And this is the problem. So even astrology is rife full of from very thing. I can't say they're wrong or right, but there's lots of schools of thought, unfortunately. So the average punter or beginner at this point in time may come across evolutionary astrology, esoteric astrology, and you might find the one that appeals to you and go with it. That's all I can say to you. Is stick with it and put in the hard yards.
Absolutely. You got to do your own research and you got to try all these things out.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, we'll wrap things up. So if you want to contact Kris, his email and his
Phone number,
Facebook.
probably. And
I
I
haven't
can
got
give
your
you the
phone
phone
number
number.
in the show notes.
Do you want me to give it out now?
You can type it, or they can just email you. You can give it to them.
Yeah, you can get. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
They can
that's
start
it.
the ball
Because
rolling.
otherwise, everyone in the world on YouTube will have your phone number.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot
Unless
about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Well, thanks for being on the show. You opened so much depth. I've never known that much about astrology.
Sorry if I drowned you.
Oh no, that's okay.
Yeah.
When's your next?
Well, I'm this Sunday at Crystal Wave, but I'm off for the first 2-day fair since COVID began in Mount Gambier on the 4th and 5th of December. I leave on the Friday, come back the Monday. I was doing those for many years, 2-day fairs, but since COVID came along, we've only had the local 1-day fairs. The next 1-day fair I'm doing is at Port Noarlunga on the 19th of December. So I tend to put my stuff on Facebook, but there's, you'll probably come across it in the events on Facebook.
Well, I've never had an astrology reading, so I'm going to come down and get one day.
Okay,
I'm
mate.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it to it. Otherwise, we'll just talk for another 3 hours. It's easy done.
Should I answer that last question that's popped up here?
Go for it.
Kris, you half answered some of my questions there, but if someone can read said generated chart, is that a good thing? Read their own chart? Yeah, it's probably a good thing if you can be objective. It's probably the hardest thing is doing readings for yourself. Looking at your chart and cherry picking what's good and not. I don't know. You really have to be quite good at being objective. So I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it is a way of learning about yourself and give you some really good insights. But it's always great to read for other people, and especially strangers, because strangers will come back and say, that was right. And sure, 5 other people who know that stranger might say, that is true. This is where it stands up, whereas you yourself might say something about something where it says, that's not true. You're really an angry person, Yeah. So you need that objectivity. Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll catch you later. So just contact in the show notes. It's got all Kris's details if you want to contact him. If you want to study or get a reading from him, it's all there. And we have we have a reading show on Sunday, Sunday and Chill. So join us for that one. Until then, everyone, have a good day. See you later.
See ya.